We are live, so prompt, every day, 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, talking Denver Broncos with you. And Mace, I'm so excited from Wild Card Weekend. We can go over it, but I'm so sad. I'm so sad today. Jim Harbaugh, you flirty fool. Fly, you fools. Damn it. I was warming up to the idea of Jim Harbaugh as the next head coach of the Broncos. And today, Macy says, I'm staying at Michigan.
Well, he said that yesterday, actually, kind of broke up the holiday for
You know what I
all
mean,
of us
baby.
here.
I'm so upset right
know.
now. I don't need to be corrected on the day. My heart is broken, Mace.
Ah,
Respond to
well,
me.
well, the thing I remember is that, oh, darn, it was a day off, right? It was a holiday. Well, no, not a holiday. I sat back down. In the time that I would have usually been talking with you, I was working
Right.
on not only a piece on Jim Harbaugh, but also kind of a little bit of a reset and kind of evaluating why I would still hire a coach with prior head coaching experience, right? And you can read all about that at denversports.com. And in fact, you're more likely, if you've got a coach who's not a first timer, you're more likely to be a playoff team the last team in 10 years than if you have a first time head coach.
Right.
So
right.
it's my way of saying, let's talk about Jim Caldwell. Let's talk about Sean Payton. Let's talk about Dan Quinn. Let's talk about Raheem Morris, who where everyone's focused on Sean Payton today. They're talking to Raheem Morris as well.
Raheem Morris could be their guy. Mace, do you have a favorite?
I think if I were putting odds on it, gambling wise,
A favorite for you. We'll talk about odds and gambling wise later because I think it might not be who people think it is. For example, for me, I would say the favorite right now of everyone that's not Jim Harbaugh, to me is Dan Quinn. My favorite on the football field would be Dan Quinn. Response in the locker room, previous head coaching experience, that hunger from not winning the Super Bowl, which we've talked about. I think privately, I don't know if we've talked about on the show. So before we get into like the Vegas odds, do you have a favorite in your household?
I mean, I think on balance, the favorite is Dan Quinn. Although I think Jim Caldwell, specifically his work with quarterbacks, his work with Peyton Manning, Joe Flacco, and Matthew Stafford in the past, I think that might actually thread a better needle of what the Broncos need right now. Now, it is interesting with Dan Quinn. Is he going to bring a former Seahawks offensive coordinator? We're talking about Brian Schottenheimer. We're talking about Darrell Bevell. We know Bevell's interviewed with one other team to be offensive coordinator / play caller. So we know Bevell's kind of in play for a move from pass game coordinator, which is in Miami, to offensive coordinator and calling plays wherever he goes. I think that partnership might work as well. But the other thing is, it's not that I'm opposed to Sean Payton as a coach. I'm just looking at it and saying, is Sean Payton a first round pick and another draft pick better than Dan Quinn or Jim Caldwell?
Right.
I'm not convinced that he is.
That's the best way to look at it, Mason. I wish more people would look at it the way that you did.
It's a value thing.
Because it is a value. It's like value-based drafting created by my good friend and boss, Joe Bryant. But like for me, somebody asked us on Twitter, and I didn't answer because Twitter's not worth my time. I apologize.
You hate Twitter.
Well, it's always been bad. People are like, it's bad now. It's always been bad. You haven't been paying attention if you thought Twitter was anything more than a waste of time. Anyway,
Facebook is worse.
Aside, it's all bad. Anyway, somebody said, if Peyton was available in this draft, wouldn't you take him with the 25th to 32nd pick? Does he block? I'm looking at this draft class. I'm looking at the tackles, which are magnifique, right? Where's our Keanu kiss for that? Like these tackles, I'm falling in love here. Falling in love, man.
Are you falling in love because you know this is the Broncos' primary need? That's the question I have.
I would be falling in love even if it wasn't their primary need. Like this is a pretty top-heavy class. Again, early swipe. We'll get more information when we see these guys on the road. But like, yeah, Sean Payton doesn't block. This team needs offensive line, and to me, it's about like protecting Russell Wilson, but it's also about after Wilson. Dan Quinn can be that guy if you're after Wilson in a year.
Ideally, yes. I think that is 100% the case. And I think the same thing is It's true, even though he's a coach who's a bit older of Jim Caldwell. Like if let's say you're in the Caldwell universe, and by the way, the Jim Caldwell universe may mean Peyton Manning being a little more involved with the Broncos and connected to the Broncos than he has been. Another name to throw out there, even though he's not a quarterback guy, is if you're in the Raheem Morris conversation, who has been a head coach before, a person who you might hear a little bit more from, even though he consults a lot with the 49ers. A person you might hear a little bit more from is Mike Shanahan, because Mike Shanahan and Raheem Morris are very close too. And of course, very telling that Raheem Morris worked for Mike Shanahan, for Sean McVay, and with Kyle Shanahan on the Falcons staff as well as an offensive coach before he went back to defense. So you're starting to kind of connect the dots here. But in all these situations, I think you're talking about, if not the head coach, having somebody on the staff who can help the quarterback position along. Whether you're talking about Russell Wilson this year, and this year is all about maximizing Russell Wilson. That's it. That's 2023. Can you get the most out of Russell Wilson to where you get to the 5th day of 2024 league year and be like, yeah, we'll take the $37 million that is going to kick in on his future salary that's guaranteed if he's on the roster 5th day of the 2024 league year. So if he does enough and you're okay with that, fine. You ride Russ for another couple of years. But if Russ doesn't progress to a point where you say, okay, we're comfortable with that, then you're developing a quarterback in 2024. You're probably drafting in round 1 and developing. And so you want to have a structure in place, no matter who the coach is, to get that right. And oh, by the way, we are not going to be talking about this coaching hire being a 1-year thing. I think whoever this coach is gets 3 years at minimum.
Mm-hmm. I might even say 4.
Yeah. The only reason I won't say 4 is you could see a scenario where things go badly and you move on. But I think at minimum, you're looking at 3 years for this coach.
Yep.
And being given that time, in part because year 1 is very much about Russ. It's what can you get out of Russ? And then if it doesn't work out, giving whoever the coach is a fair shot with a round 1 quarterback in 24 when the pool is pretty deep.
Now, I'll bring up his comment here, and I want to preface it by saying Nate is one of the good guys. One, he's a regular to Orange and Blue Today every single day, and he asks a fair question. I don't think it's unfair, or else I wouldn't be as kind in my response. And we already answered the second question, but he's like, is the next coach going to be a rental? No. But are we settling for Quinn? And I think the excitement hardwall, listen, I'm heartbroken over Jim Harbaugh, and my pipe dream was Sean Payton. But when you think about it, do I want a fantasy? David in the chat room says the cult of personality. Like I want the best head coach, in my opinion, after examining everything. I believe that's Dan Quinn now. So are we settling for Quinn? And this will be something that when Quinn is hired, and I think it's when, not if, we're going to get these type of questions, Mace. And I think it's fair.
I think it's fair as well. But I would also say this. If Jim Harbaugh wasn't all in, you didn't want him. Okay. I mean, maybe the hopes were there. The hopes were at a certain point. But that coach has got to want you as badly as you want him. Another thing that I think is sort of working against Dan Quinn in the court of public opinion, and I don't think this is fair to Quinn at all, is the people that want George Paton out as GM know and understand that Dan Quinn becoming head coach, someone who has a relationship with George Paton going back nearly 2 decades, that probably cements George Paton as general manager. And I may take some heat for this statement, Cease, but I think that's a good thing. I think you want George Paton making a lot of these day-to-day roster building decisions. You want George Paton keenly involved with the draft, because in 2 drafts, 8 picks of the first four rounds, he's found 6 at least very good starters, right? Six guys who look like they're all trending toward getting second contracts the way they're playing. And among those 6 is one who is a legit superstar in Pat Surtain. That's pretty good. And that's something the Broncos weren't doing from their previous drafts, finding that many players who were not simply starters, but good starters. guys that you get enough of them, you're really building a pretty dadgum good team around.
The results from the previous drafts are why we're here.
Yeah,
Like, that's
exactly.
why. And it's not just getting second contracts here. It's also teams coveting those players when they become free
Mhm.
agents, making you have tough decisions. So yeah, I think you and I are on the same page as far as like, we don't need this fire Peyton stuff. Now, he still might be in May, but like, let's keep drafting with George Payton. Like, let
Mhm.
him do the work and get him out of the head coaching search, which is what he's doing. It's a Greg Penner decision, and Payton will be advised on that. Now, I know that everyone checks out the Denver Sports Daily and denversports.com. Brad D talking about drafting a quarterback every year. Yeah, late round quarterback every year. Why? Because you could have gotten Brock Purdy or Skylar Thompson. And it's interesting to note, and I didn't tweet about this, Mace, probably on purpose. You'll understand why. We saw 2 Shrine Game quarterbacks start in the
Mhm.
playoffs. Skylar Thompson and Brock Purdy. We didn't see
Mhm.
any Senior Bowl quarterbacks even make the playoffs. So always interesting to that kind of battle for talent there that the Senior Bowl wins every year.
Yeah, but here's the thing on those Senior Bowl quarterbacks, because you have to look at the situation, right? Sam
Kenny Pickett could
Howell.
have made it. If
Yeah,
Malik Willis would
well,
have played better, he might have led the Titans to the postseason.
did Pickett not play better as the season went on? You're Mr. Steelers fan, Cease. Kenny Pickett looks like he's heading in the right direction. I mean, I think Pittsburgh's a playoff team next year with Kenny Pickett.
I think they'll always sniff around the playoffs with a Pickett. At the end of the day, I think he's Derek Carr, which there's a ceiling that he'll hit on his head.
But also that's where the organization matters, because I think with the Raiders, it's kind of a chaotic operation. With Derek Carr, as good as he is, you were talking about 2 playoff appearances in 9 years. If you put Derek Carr in Pittsburgh, I think you would have had much better results in terms of the overall team performance. So if Kenny Pickett is Derek Carr, the outcome in Pittsburgh, because organizations do succeed collectively, the outcome looks an awful lot different, and you're having some success. And then the other guy that comes into play when we're talking about last year's quarterbacks is Sam Howell, who appears to be on track to be given a legitimate chance to start in Washington
He'll
this
compete
coming
with
year.
somebody next year. He should.
And again, we don't have a big sample size. We got preseason. We've got what he was doing in camp and how he was coming along. And we have that season ender against Dallas when Dallas was playing its starters. The glimpses we've gotten of Sam Howell are pretty promising so far.
Yeah, and I wrote about
that's
it.
Where, I would have picked Sam Howell round 4 last year if I were the Broncos.
Yeah, Sam Howell would have been perfect, because we're talking about a player that was considered a possibility as number 1 overall.
Right.
So you have Sam Howell on this team. Immediately, you're better than with Brett Rippon. And immediately, imagine that, dude. You're just giving me chills just talking about it, because I've always talked about Skylar Thompson in the 7th, which is more developmental and not the upside. And certainly the injuries of Skylar are what brought him down at Kansas State. And Brock Purdy, I was excited last year going into the Shrine Bowl to see Brock Purdy. And then I was disappointed when I saw Brock Purdy. He's in a perfect system for him with Kyle Shanahan there. But I look at it now and I go, imagine if Sam Howell was here and you'd have a guy that you could develop behind Russ, just in case 2023 didn't go Russ's way.
Right.
You'd be more than fine with Sam Howell.
Wouldn't the end of this season have been a lot more interesting with Sam Howell out there for those with 2 starts, 1 at midseason, 1 late season?
Right.
Frankly, I think that Jets game might have been a win with Sam Howell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And all of a sudden, you've really changed things, Cease, because you might be sitting at 4-4 at midseason instead of 3-5. And who knows where you're at confidence-wise if you're at 500 going into the bye. That's one of those little things that might have changed everything. Of course, we might be talking about Nathaniel Hackett still being the coach of this team, which I'm not sure a lot of people would have wanted.
Right. But to me, it's the long-term health of the Denver Broncos. It's not even really about the players themselves, although they must play well. It's not about George Payton. It's not necessarily about Russell Wilson or Nathaniel Hackett, but like the long-term health means like have a young guy ready. Have a young guy you're grooming. And then if that's Skylar Thompson or Brock Purdy or Sam Howell or whatever, You're grooming him. He's nothing. Great. You dump him. You don't, I mean, nobody bats an eye at it. Hey, you cut a 5th round quarterback. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
Right.
You have something. Oh my God. What a genius move to find insert Brock Purdy's name, Sam Howell's name. And yeah, even Skylar Thompson.
Of course, that's where the quality of the coaches comes in and who's developing them. And that's where it's not simply about the head coach. It's about who they hire. I mean, if we're talking about like Dan Quinn, for example, he puts together pretty good staffs. He has the ability to attract some good coaches to his staff. If it's Jim Caldwell, well, there's your guy who's working with quarterbacks right there, is the head coach, and that's somebody I would trust to see where a 7th rounder goes. I mean, I know you're a Jaron Hall guy. What if we're talking about Dorian Thompson-Robinson in round 7? Okay, a flyer. There's your Shrine Bowl round 7 quarterback who could be a sleeper.
Exactly.
Why not? Yeah.
And you take a chance on the physical assets. And again, you just see it's pretty easy to tell, Mace. Like maybe teams make it more complicated than it is, but you and I have seen enough pro practices, to watch a guy and be like, okay, the game's not too big for him. When Skylar Thompson's in there in a wild card game and he's putting up a fight against Buffalo, like the game's not too big for him. Again, I think there's a limit for Skylar, but I liked him as a sleeper quarterback. But like you just see, like, oh, he doesn't look overwhelmed. Malik Willis, I just brought up. How many times that guy looked overwhelmed? Every time he was on the field. Desmond Ridder, hey, Desmond Ridder wets the bed, just like he did at Cincinnati when he was under pressure, when he played slappies and he was surrounded by really good talent with Cincinnati. Desmond Ridder looked pretty good. The pro game is so different.
So we're basically talking about 3 guys. You have these quarterbacks. You have 5 guys. The 2 that were taken in round 3 were overwhelmed, and the 3 guys who were taken round 5 and later were not, because we're talking about Skylar Thompson, Brock Purdy, Sam Howell, round 5 and later, and they looked the part, all 3 of them. I mean, with Skylar Thompson, we might be talking about him having just authored one of the greatest upsets in recent NFL history.
Right.
If his guys could have caught the ball.
Oh, and got the plays in on time. I thought that's where you're going. I was like, get the plays in on time. Get the plays in on time.
Okay. Some of that's getting it in on time. Some of it, and this is an issue a lot of times for quarterbacks coming from college to the NFL, and especially absorbing that West Coast nomenclature, is the thing with the West Coast offense. It's the quarterback has so much cerebral responsibility, because you're talking about a 9 to 11 word play call, because what the quarterback is doing is giving code words to everybody in that huddle, and the quarterback has to keep them straight. Whereas with, if you go with the Earhart-Perkins verbiage, it's a 3-word play call, which is a little easier for the quarterback to learn, but puts more of the burden on everybody else. Whereas in the West Coast, the burden all falls on the cerebral burden primarily falls on the quarterback compared to the other players. And that's just part and parcel of it, and something that a lot of quarterbacks struggle at. And look, some never get it. Paxton Lynch never got it. Never got the ability to barf out the 9 to 11 word play call. Drew Lock struggled mightily at that. Trevor Siemian got it. What limited him was his physical gifts or lack thereof for an NFL quarterback. But he had more. If you could have taken his ability to handle the verbiage and put it into Paxton Lynch, you would have had a hell of a quarterback. But alas.
Our guy Jose asks, no love for Bailey Zappi. Not from me. We saw him last year at the Senior Bowl, and like he's better than Mac Jones, but I don't think Mac Jones is really good, my opinion. But no love for Bailey Zappi. And watching him last year, if we went from those 2 weeks as we will this year, when we watched Skylar Thompson and Brock Purdy, then I watched the rest, Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder at the Senior. When we saw Zappi more fit with like Purdy and Thompson, and I would prefer Purdy and Thompson over Zappi. So I wasn't dazzled by his 7 million yards at Western Kentucky.
It's interesting because the Patriots in back-to-back years, one in the first round, one in the middle rounds, took 2 quarterbacks in Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, who don't have all the clubs in their bag.
No,
they can't make all the throws in a way that Brock Purdy can, Skylar Thompson can. Sam Howell, there isn't, Sam Howell's probably got 2 drivers in his bag, right? I mean, that's the difference. And you and I,
How can Scoot though too? That's what I like.
Yeah, and when you and I were watching Senior Bowl practices last year. And this is why the all-star games are so illustrative, because you get the immediate contrast, right?
Mhm.
So you can see one quarterback and then you see the next quarterback doing the same thing, and you get a really kind of good feel for him. And like, one of the things that we got, like Malik Willis, yeah, he can make all the throws, but there are certain, like, every so often he'll bust off a play action, but you could tell that operating an NFL offense was something that was kind of awkward to him. Whereas, and then you see Sam Howell, he's pushing it down the field in a way that Bailey Zappi can't, right? That's the sort of thing that happens. It's the sort of thing that we're going to be bringing to you here in actually, I mean, shoot, starting in it's 10 days, right? That you and I, is it 10 days or 11 days that you and I are going to be
Uh, it's
out there, you and I,
10
yeah,
days I fly. Yeah, so the
yeah,
27th. Yep.
yeah. You and I are going to be out there at the UNLV practice fields starting to watch these guys. So,
Yeah, so make sure to stay tuned. Orange and Blue today. We have to figure out the logistics, but we're gonna have some special shows for you,
yeah.
and special footage. My plan is to shoot a lot, Mace, and then we'll use it on the show, and then use it for other shows too. Like,
Mhm.
I think you'll see a lot as much as you can. We can't really do practice footage at the Senior Bowl. We can at the Shrine Bowl,
Oh,
and
the
of
senior
course our
cut that off
reactions.
this year?
They usually do if it's not a TV affiliate. At least that were their old rules. We'd have to check in with their new
Oh,
rules.
I mean, I guess because I've never had a problem, and like I shot everything at practice last year.
Do you
No
put
one,
it on somewhere that's not social networking? You put it on something that's evergreen?
I put it on Twitter.
Okay, I think they allow that.
Okay.
But I know that when we did our, you'll remember this, Mace. Maybe not many people do, and nobody's still done it. If somebody could do it, or if Bonneville could pay for it, when we did draft guys, like
Mhm.
and we would show practice footage and break down the practice footage, like with a telestrator type stuff.
Mhm.
Shrine game all day, do it all the
Yeah.
time. We did it for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Senior Bowl shut it down after the first season. They're like, no, you can't take a telestrator and go over practice film and blah blah blah. But like,
Oh, see,
if someone did draft guys today, we were like, because that was 2008 2009, so we were like 10 years ahead.
see, you're
um
you're you're doing kind of the breakdown. I'm posting like individual
yeah, yeah,
highlights, like,
yeah, I don't think they
yeah.
mind that at all. You post it up on Twitter. So but we'll have
Like,
all that and
mhm.
then some in a bag of chips. But looking forward to that. Yeah, 10 days from now. So we'll be, and the
I
great
know.
thing is
It's
it's business for me, and that's the way I love it. And I know that you're the same way. So when you are there, it's just going to be grind, 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 work, work, work.
mhm,
And that's what I want, because to
mhm.
me, and I'll take a little moment, Mace. I think the Senior Bowl has become too touristy. The Shrine Bowl is like the Senior Bowl used to be. So it's like kind of the
Yeah.
inside, more scout, like more access, like it's
Mhm.
better. It's old school. The Senior Bowl now, because they credential anybody, is more like touristy, like, hey, our brand is here. Look at our brand. And I've seen
Right.
guys, quote unquote, well respected people, not by me, but by some, that have huge Twitter followings that go to practice and they don't have a flipping notebook. And I'm like, you're there to chase chunky interns. Like, don't do that. Like, go to work. And that's what those practices represent to me, because those young men, this is the biggest job interview of their lives, Mace. It's look at how many players we've seen at the intersection of the NFL and college football. We've seen Russell
Mhm.
Wilson at the Senior
Yeah.
Bowl. We've seen Kirk Cousins. We've seen, all these types and sorts. So it's just a fantastic time. It's all about the work.
It is. And you know what? Let's let's say the Broncos don't hire Sean Payton. They still have that first round pick. The thing is, there's a very real chance they take that and they split that in day two picks, right? That you're talking about. Maybe you go from pick 28 or wherever it ends up, depending on the 49ers finish. You split that into pick 40 and pick 70, right? There's going to be some pick splitting going on because the Broncos need a lot of guys, and George Payton believes in the more dart strategy. But you know what? You're going to know about these guys if you're following Cecil and I, because we're going to be out there actually seeing these players in action. And I mean, right down to you and I are going to be checking out some pro days when we get to
Mhm.
March, schedule permitting. And so we're gonna have our eyes and going to be able to kind of tell you what we think. And we were kind of having a meeting today about starting to plan even how our draft coverage is going to look at denversports.com and 104.3 The Fan. And it's like, we're gonna have a lot of it done because you and I are going to have done the dirty work on these guys to tell you what you really should know and what's important about these guys. And so when we got to pop on right away, we'll be able to to give you the dope. But that's what the next few months are about. We're gonna
brain dump.
Yeah, we're gonna we're diving in. We get to see these some of these guys. We see them in person for the first time. We're gonna start telling you, hey, who do you keep your eye on? Who's worth watching? Who's not? I mean, and just an example. I mean, you have done Shrine Bowls. I've done Shrine Bowls, Senior Bowls. I mean, we come back and we're telling you about guys like McTelvin Ajim who didn't pan out. But I'll tell you about a guy who did pan out from the Shrine. That was Justin Simmons. I'll tell you another guy who panned out from the Shrine for the Broncos. That was Philip Lindsay.
Philip Lindsay at your high school. His practices were at your old high school.
Yeah, I mean unfortunately, this skill set is what doomed him to a short career. But the thing that he showed that week was how fearless he was going into a stacked box. So wasn't the thing that was good for a long career for Phil, but it was one of the things that made him viable for a couple of 1,000-yard seasons for the Broncos.
I remember seeing Alex Highsmith there, and I remember seeing Trey Hendrickson there. I remember telling people that Trey Hendrickson is like Derek Wolfe. No apologies to our friend Derek Wolfe. Trey Hendrickson's better than Derek Wolfe. And he was what, a 4th-round pick for the Saints?
4th-round pick, and I think Alex Highsmith was a 3rd-round pick.
3rd-round pick, yep.
Out of UNC. I still want to say UNC Charlotte. They prefer Charlotte, but the school is named the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I'm just saying.
At Charlotte. Okay, so it's like UNCC.
It's always, look, to me, it's still UNCC. That when I grew up and they only had basketball and not football, the jerseys said UNCC. And Jose saying, please have an eye out for safeties. Yes, we will have an eye out for safety. We're going to have an eye out for everything. But if they go for a defensive back pick at some point in the draft, it's probably going to be safety rather than corner. Corner is one of the few positions, frankly, Cecil, where you look at this roster and say they're pretty good with what they got.
All right, that's a wrap. Got to tie it up a little bit early today. Appreciate everyone out there for watching. And we've given you enough 40-minute shows where we reference Seinfeld or 80s hair metal or whatever we do. I don't know where we go sometimes. It's just like we wake up. I like it's Will Ferrell and Old School when he does the debate, right? Against whoever that bright bald guy is, and then he just comes
James Carville.
Yeah, Carville, yeah. Democratic strategist James Carville, but like
the raging Cajun.
Will Ferrell just like wakes up like from the brain dump. It's like, oh, where did we go? What do we say? That's kind of how it happens on Orange and Blue today. But we appreciate you all. Be safe, be kind. Know that you are appreciated. He's Mace. I'm Cease. We are Orange and Blue today, everyone. Stay tuned. And as always, please stay frosty.